century began, we still got around the place on horses and carts. So it's less than 100 years since we first took to the air in machines. When this century began, people who thought we could fly were still considered crazy. Nowadays, huge, comfortable machines hurtle millions of people a year through the stratosphere at speeds of 900 kilometres an hour or more. And it was air travel which freed New Zealand forever from the tyranny of distance. Of course, it took a lot of crazy people, lateral thinkers, that is, to turn fanciful ideas into things that work. Mind you, not all met with unbridled success. But some of our most innovative thinkers have been our cowcockies. It was a South Canterbury farmer, Richard Pearce, who made our first, perhaps the first, powered flight in New Zealand around 1903 or 1904. A few friends saw Richard Pearce fly his machine 150 metres or so before he crash-landed into a gorse hedge. If only he'd told the world about this flight. If only he'd invited the local press along to watch and record the momentous event, then Richard Pearce may have become famous instead of the Wright brothers, and Temuka could be famous for more than earthenware pottery. We did have our own Wright brothers, though, the Walsh brothers of Auckland, and they were our real pioneers of flying. These two lads found an easier way to fly. They imported a kit set and built their own biplane. The Manurewa was launched in 1911. One day, the plane hit a bump and it flipped. The brothers left it in the paddock overnight, and local cows ate the sweet-tasting fabric wings. Undeterred, the Walsh brothers went on to build our first flying planes, taking off from Kohimarama waterfront. People flocked for rides over Auckland. In 1915, this is what you'd see, and it's some of the first footage taken of Auckland by air. Sailing ships still in the port. A flying school was the brothers' next enterprise. For £125, you could get your aviator's certificate. World War I, the Walsh brothers and Christchurch aviator Henry Wigram were training pilots for the British Royal Flying Corps, the only flying schools outside Britain licensed to train pilots for the war. This is the cockpit of an Air Force Hercules. Look at the huge array of information and instrumentation available for the modern pilot. Your navigational equipment, your altimeter, radio, everything you need to know about the engines. This is a far cry from what was available to the World War I pilot. All he had for flying in all kinds of weather, all kinds of conditions, were a simple compass and his wits. Primitive stuff. Load your bombs under your seat and then chuck them out. No parachutes, of course, never mind. After the Great War, over 200 New Zealand pilots came home. But having miraculously survived, many now seemed hell-bent on killing themselves as they took to joy-riding and barnstorming around the country.
Smith, what that name conjures up.
But a new world opened up in 1928. The Australian Charles Kingsford Smith made the first trans-Tasman flight in the Southern Cross, from Sydney through to Christchurch. Instead of 10-minute joyrides, there was now a real possibility of flying to other countries. The barriers of speed and distance were breaking down. Now, in the 1930s, we embraced air travel around New Zealand. Enough to sustain 4 passenger airlines, each carrying a handful of people and a few bags of mail.
They were very, very significant because they were the forerunners of a network that opened up isolated areas for us. They put in strips all over the place, the rugged west coast. All of these areas suddenly became accessible in short time. So they carried machinery, tools, equipment, people, and ambulance cases. There's no other form of transport could ever match this.
The first Lockheed Electras in 1937 heralded the modern flying era for New Zealand. They were all metal and very modern looking. The Electra roared along at 165 miles an hour, carrying a remarkable 10 passengers. Now, in the 1920s, with aviation still in its brilliant infancy, a young Rotorua-born girl was developing an obsession with flying. Jean Batten, our Jean as we called her, became Queen of the Skies. She thrilled us all with her record-breaking solo flights from the UK to Australia and New Zealand.
I was able to fly through from England to New Zealand in the fastest time in the history of the world. And I think I can say without doubt it was the very greatest moment of my life.
By the mid-1930s, the beautiful, enigmatic Jean Batten captured the imagination of the world. She became a celebrity, a star, an aviation legend. But Jean's light faded as quickly as it appeared in the sky, blocked out by the dark clouds of war. World War II. Mother England calls for help. New Zealand is there. Once again, we trained pilots for the Empire, this time in Tiger Moths built in Wellington on the site of the present airport. New Zealand flyers distinguished themselves in battles over Europe and the Pacific, and when it was over, we'd provided 12,000 aircrew for the Allied victory. But in the midst of the mayhem of war, an important event. In 1940, our national carrier, Tasman Empire Airways Limited, or TEAL, made its first international flight. The flying boat Aotearoa flew to Sydney, the start of our scheduled air link across the Tasman. It took the 9 passengers and crew 9 hours to cross the Tasman. Of course, it's 3 hours today, but that journey was a breakthrough. And the flight also carried our mail. 41,000 pieces destined for Australia and beyond. And the aircraft returned with mail from our British cousins that they had posted a mere 12 days earlier. So you no longer had to wait until February to get your Christmas cards. The Aotearoa later became a tea room and Teal became Air New Zealand. But in those days, flying was the preserve of the wealthier New Zealanders of the time, and there was a distinctive glamour about it. People dressed up to travel then. No jeans and T-shirts here. So successful was the Trans-Tasman operation that in 1951, Teal started its famous Coral route. This flying boat service took you from Auckland to Tahiti to Fiji and the Cook Islands. Here it is, international flying at its most glamorous. Could still be a little bit bumpy though, the Solid couldn't always get above the weather. 7,000 to 8,000 feet she cruised at. Room on the aircraft for 45 passengers, though those numbers could be suddenly reduced if the airmail were especially heavy that day. The airmail had the priority. A most exotic series of stopovers it was.
Passengers for Wellington and Auckland.
Closer to home, domestic air travel grew tremendously after the war. The government took over the 4 local airlines and launched NAC, the National Airways Corporation, in 1947.
Passengers okay? Yes, they're set.
NAC's small fleet of aircraft were hand-me-downs, surplus to Air Force requirements. They were stripped of camouflage, fitted with seats and Bob's your uncle, a shiny, near-new airliner.
The name of the airliner, Takada, is painted on the nose and the aircraft is given a final rub down. It's ready to go.
These DC-3s, with heated cabins and soundproofing, were tremendously popular with the travellers.
It was also, I think, an absolute surprise to them that they got somewhere as quickly as they did. Although in terms of today's flying, that really wasn't very fast, but they couldn't believe that they were there. We didn't even have a PA system, and so the pilots would write out on a little pad details of the height that we were at, the speed that we were travelling at, the expected time of arrival and their names and that sort of thing, and that would be passed through the cabin from the people sitting in the front, passed right through and right back again. So that was the communication from the flight deck.
Before the war, 32,000 people a year flew around New Zealand. By 1947, the number had reached 136,000. With the post-war boom in the numbers of people travelling by aeroplane, the skies became more crowded for our pilots, and there was a need to control the takeoffs and landings of our aerodromes. This next piece of film shows a group of air traffic controllers getting some practical training. Well, it looks like child's play.
Bringing the planes in day and night are the backroom boys of the air business, the traffic controllers. In Auckland, the Civil Aviation Department trains new controllers on a model aerodrome, where a mistake only means a broken toy, not a wrecked aircraft. Few grown men spend their time playing with toy aeroplanes, but for the students, this is no game. The instructor can create any situation likely to occur at an aerodrome. He can vary the speed of aircraft and the direction and force of the wind. Control officers must know how to cope with any emergency, and dreaming up difficult exercises is a big part of an instructor's job.
Before the model aerodrome, there was probably nothing. There's some rumours they used to wander around a room with boater hats on with aircraft on top of them, trying to get the trainees to visualise or see in their mind's eye, if you like, where the traffic is. And then someone cottoned on to the idea of using models.
Training covers all aspects of control, including night flying.
National 104, this is Model Drome Tower. Cleared to land, out.
One of the instructor chiefs at the old CAA school first developed the concept of using a model, and I guess it's a salute to Kiwi ingenuity and number 8 wire. Unique as far as we know in the world, as far as aerodrome simulation is concerned.
The end of the war had also had other spin-offs for aviation. Now, what do you do if you've got several dozen second-hand tiger moths, you've got thousands of acres of rugged country, hundreds of trained airmen, and tons of fertiliser? Well, in 1948, the RNZAF, Federated Farmers, and the DSIR got together and put it all together and came up with the idea of aerial farming, aerial top dressing. People had talked about it for years, but nobody had ever taken it that seriously.
They were the carefree days. Planes took off and landed in any paddock they could get fertiliser trucks to.
But it worked. Suddenly farmers could reach their rough country, fertilise it, and make it more productive.
Machines were developed to load the planes because farmers were crying out to have their farms dusted with...
The star of this new air industry was the tiger moth. By 1953, there were 160 agricultural aircraft, all but 14 tiger moths.
There were plenty of ex-Air Force types busting to have a go.
Though not all the pilots made a smooth transition from fighter pilot to top dresser. Down in paddocks and on beaches, wherever they could find. It seems for years our pilots were flying without anywhere halfway decent to land the planes. Our airfield facilities, you see, were always lagging well behind our zest for flying. Here's the terminal building in Hamilton in 1950. Things were even worse in Invercargill, but it was Wellington that got the flash new facility in the 1950s. It took 7 years to build Rongotai Airport. A hill had to be shifted. Yes, just put it over there, thank you. And the tarmac was extended into Cook Strait.
An entanglement of 15-ton tetrapods was built into an 850-foot breakwater to protect the scheme from Cook Strait southerlies.
At the air show, to celebrate the opening in 1959, NAC showed off its new Fokker Friendship.
The Fokker Friendship turboprop plane shows takeoff and later one motor performance.
Now, anything Wellington does, Auckland has to do bigger and better. So when Auckland's International Airport opened in 1966, there was a 3-day, no-expense-spared sky pageant. The jet age was upon us.
98,000 people swarmed to Mangere for the opening of Auckland's new £10 million international airport. 16 years of planning, 5 years of physical work, and now the big day.
But Auckland had its share of problems with the world's first frequent flyers.
Before the terminal was built, the mudflats were frequented only by birds. With the airport open, the birds became a hazard. Bullets were tried first. But the flocks appeared to get bigger. Then an automatic noise deterrent was installed. a radio-controlled hawk took to the air to scare the smaller birds from Mangere. A grim warning followed, but proved to be unimpressive. A practical deterrent was tried next. After a week or so of this, the birds almost looked forward to it and enjoyed the game as much as the dog. It was becoming obvious that the birds couldn't easily be scared from the airport, so they would have to be lured away. An island was selected, just offshore from Mangere, but far enough away to eliminate the bird hazard on the runway approaches. At first, the birds showed indifference to the new roosts, but as familiarity grows, more and more are shifting onto Wirroa Island, an island strictly for the birds.
First we try to fly like them, you see, then we crucify them. Shameless, really. By the late 1960s and early 70s, we found new and exciting uses for our power of flight. The 1960s threw up the flying grandmother.
What does it feel like standing on top of a plane at such a height?
Well, it was quite a pleasure, really. I didn't mind it a bit. I was just looking down on all the houses and people.
You don't feel afraid at any time?
No, I didn't feel a bit afraid.
Do you get tired standing for so long?
No, I wasn't even tired.
Well, the cold, does that worry you?
Well, the cold, I didn't feel it on the hands, but it was a bit cold on my face and chest.
In the back blocks, helicopters recovered live deer. And from this National Film Unit piece, we got a new perspective on our landscape. And the jet age meant we could fly our own airline to the Northern Hemisphere.
The DC-8, the DC-10 and the 747 certainly got rid of our island isolation for us, linked us with Australia, Asia, the States, in fact globally. And for the first time we had really beaten the tyranny of distance.
Once we started to fly, the world became a much smaller place. Months of travel became weeks, weeks became hours and minutes. And these days we take flying for granted. Even the international flight is no longer the grand occasion it once was. But there's still romance, there's still adventure, and we New Zealanders love to fly like the birds, with whatever it takes.
Those magnificent men in their flying machine, they go up to the up, they go down to the down. They enchant all the ladies and steal all the scene with their up to the up, and their down to the down. Up, down, flying around, looping the loop and defying the ground. They're all frightfully keen, those magnificent men in their flying machine.
The sun